A big mistake in Big Bend National Park. I'll be back. I promise. The stepfather rasped through a throat that felt like jagged glass. He left his 14-year-old stepson collapsing in 120-degree heat, sprinting toward a trailhead that felt miles away. He reached his SUV, gasping for air that burned his lungs, and floored the accelerator. He was the protector, the one who had led them into this furnace, and he was the only hope they had left. But as the tires screamed on the asphalt, his heat-cooked brain made a fatal turn that ensured no one was coming to save the boys. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. Big Bend National Park is a place where beauty masks a very sharp edge. Spanning over 800,000 acres along the Texas-Mexico border, it's a landscape defined by towering canyon walls and endless desert basins. In late June 2023, the park was essentially a furnace. The air didn't just shimmer, it felt heavy, a physical weight pressing down on everything it touched. A 1-year-old stepfather and his 2 stepsons, aged 14 and 21, arrived from Florida ready for an adventure. They were used to the humid coastal heat of Orlando, but the Chihuahuan Desert is a different animal entirely. It's a dry, relentless heat that steals the moisture from your body before you even realize you're sweating. On this particular day, temperatures were screaming toward 119 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite the heat warnings plastered everywhere, the family stepped onto the Marufo Vega Trail. Now, you have to understand the Marufo Vega. It's a 14-mile loop that drops you from the desert plateau down toward the Rio Grande before forcing you to climb all the way back out. It's rated as hard on every hiking app for a reason. It's often called the deadliest hike in Texas. There's no shade, no water, no ranger stations. Once you descend into that loop, the canyon walls hem you in, making it nearly impossible to retrace your steps or find a quick exit. The rock itself stores heat like a debt, radiating it back at you well into the evening. To make matters worse, the trail is deceptive. From the trailhead, it looks open and manageable. The descent gives you this false sense of progress, making you think the hardest part is behind you when the real danger is actually miles ahead. The family started their hike late in the afternoon. Everything felt good at first. The desert has this way of looking peaceful, with its pale stone cliffs and the green ribbon of the river far below. They probably talked about school or home, their boots crunching rhythmically on the dry earth. This was supposed to be a bonding trip, a chance for a stepfather to get closer to his older stepkids. But as they moved deeper, the sun began to press down with a terrifying intensity. Every step started to cost more than the last. The air was so dry that sweat evaporated instantly, giving them a dangerous illusion of being cool while their bodies were actually accelerating toward dehydration. They were walking right into the middle of a record-breaking heat wave. 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded in Texas, and more than 300 people died from heat-related causes that summer. By choosing this trail in this season, they were entering an environment that had already proven it could kill. The 4-year-old was likely the first to show signs. His pace probably became uneven. He might have paused more frequently, adjusting his pack and breathing harder. Early heat stress is subtle confusion. Dizziness and fatigue are easy to dismiss as just being tired from the hike. The older brother and stepfather likely encouraged him to keep going, unaware of how quickly heat illness can turn into a catastrophe. As they moved deeper into the loop, their options were quietly narrowing. The distance from the trailhead grew, and any thought of turning around became a complicated, exhausting prospect. Dehydration doesn't scream at you. It steals from you politely. Your muscles weaken, your judgment dulls, and your brain, starved of balance, begins to lie to you. Somewhere along that trail, long before anyone collapsed, the balance between effort and survival shifted. The boy likely stumbled, or finally just sat down, unable to move another inch. The stepfather probably knelt beside him, feeling the heat radiating off the boy's skin and seeing that distant, glassy look in his eyes. He shook him gently, saying his name, but the response wasn't there. This is where the story fractures. There is no right choice when every option is dangerous. They tried to lift him, trying to hoist his weight onto their shoulders. But a body is so much heavier when it can't help you carry it. Everyone was already feeling the effects of the 120-degree heat. They knew they had to do something drastic. The stepfather made the gut-wrenching decision to go for help alone. He told the older brother to stay with his sibling, to keep him shaded, and promised he'd be back. Then, he turned and started a desperate run back toward the trailhead. He was pushing his body into a pace it was never meant to sustain in lethal heat. With every step, the realization likely grew heavier. He had misjudged the conditions, and one simple choice, made hours ago, had put his family in a fight for their lives. He was running toward help, but the desert was already closing in. The moment the 14-year-old hit the ground, the desert silence changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, pressing against their eardrums like a physical weight. The stepfather knelt in the dust, his knees crunching against the sharp volcanic rock. He reached out to touch the boy's shoulder and immediately pulled back. The heat radiating off the kid's skin felt like a stovetop. He wasn't sweating. That's the terrifying part about heat stroke in the Chihuahuan desert. Your body just gives up on cooling itself. The boy's eyes were open, but he wasn't really there. He was staring at something 1,000 miles away, his pupils pinned under the glare of a sun that showed no interest in mercy. The 21-year-old stood over them, his own shadow a short, jagged blotch on the ground. He was fumbling with a water bottle, his fingers clumsy and shaking. They tried to get the boy to drink, but he couldn't swallow. The water just dribbled down his chin, disappearing into the parched earth instantly. They tried to lift him, one on each side, but the physics of survival had shifted. A 140-pound teenager becomes a dead weight when he can't find his own footing. Every time they tried to hoist him up, the stepfather's own heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The heat was inside them now. It was in their blood, thinning their thoughts and turning their muscles to lead. That's when the stepfather looked at his older stepson and made the call. It's the kind of decision that haunts a person for a lifetime, the kind where every option leads to a different version of a nightmare. He decided to run. He figured if he could just reach the trailhead, get to the car, and find a ranger, they'd have a chance. He told the older boy to stay put. Keep him in whatever shade you can find. He rasped, his throat feeling like he'd swallowed a handful of dry sand. Don't let him go. I'll be back. I promise. He didn't wait for an answer. He couldn't afford to see the look in his stepson's eyes. He turned and started to move, his boots kicking up clouds of fine, white dust that tasted like copper and old bone. He wasn't just hiking anymore. He was sprinting through a furnace. In temperatures hitting 120 degrees, the human body is a ticking clock. The faster you move, the more internal heat you generate, and the faster your fluids vanish. He was redlining. His vision started to tunnel, the edges of the landscape blurring into a hazy, shimmering mess of brown and orange. He was running on pure adrenaline and a crushing sense of responsibility. He kept thinking about the boy's mother, back in Florida, waiting for a check-in call that was already hours late. The injustice of it all kept him moving. He was the protector, the one who was supposed to make this work, and he'd led them right into a death trap. He finally reached the trailhead, his lungs screaming for air that didn't feel like fire. The silver SUV was sitting there in the gravel lot, looking like a beacon of hope. But a car in the desert isn't a sanctuary. It's a greenhouse made of glass and steel. He fumbled with the keys, his fine motor skills almost entirely gone. He managed to get inside, and the blast of trapped air was suffocating, likely pushing 140 degrees. He didn't wait. He didn't think to sit there for 5 minutes while the AC fought the heat. He was in survival mode, and survival mode doesn't allow for patience. He shifted into gear and floored it, the tires spitting gravel as he tore onto the blacktop. But his brain was already cooked. Heat illness acts a lot like severe intoxication. It erodes your judgment and slows your reflexes until you're navigating through a thick mental fog. He was supposed to turn southwest toward the Rio Grande village where the Rangers were. Instead, his impaired mind made a fatal error. He turned toward Boquillas Canyon overlook. It's a narrow, winding road with sharp curves and steep drop-offs that require absolute focus even on a good day. He was driving through a blur, his hands slippery on the wheel. His heart rate probably still in the triple digits. He hit a sharp curve near the overlook, and the world just tilted. There were no skid marks, no signs of a last-second correction. The vehicle drifted off the pavement, caught the edge of the embankment, and began to roll. It was a violent, mechanical chaos of shattering glass and twisting metal. The SUV tumbled down the hill, coming to rest in a crumpled heap at the bottom. Inside, the man who had run miles through a 120-degree desert to save his family lay silent. Whether the crash killed him or the heat finished what the trail started, the result was the same. The rescue effort had ended in the very lot where it was supposed to begin. Back on the trail, the two brothers were still waiting. The sun was finally starting to dip toward the horizon, but the temperature wasn't dropping. The rock walls were still pumping out heat like an oven that had been left on. The older brother was holding his sibling, trying to fan him with a hat, whispering words that he knew deep down weren't true anymore. He kept looking toward the ridge, expecting to see the silhouette of his stepfather and a team of rangers coming over the crest. He didn't know the car was at the bottom of a ravine. He didn't know that the person he was counting on was gone. He was alone in the deadliest part of Texas, holding a boy whose heart was quietly slowing down to nothing. The silence out there is different when you're the only one left to hear it. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of a place that has finished what it started. The older brother realized the breathing had stopped. He checked for a pulse, his own hands shaking so hard he could barely feel his own skin. Nothing, just the heat and the fading light. He had to make the second impossible choice of the day. If he stayed, he was going to die right next to his brother. If he left, he'd have to leave him there, alone, in the dirt. He stood up, his legs feeling like they were made of water, and started to walk. He didn't look back. He couldn't. He just kept moving toward a trailhead that held a secret he wasn't ready to find. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving a bruised purple sky that offered no relief. In the Chihuahuan Desert, the end of the day doesn't mean the end of the heat. The limestone cliffs of Big Bend keep breathing out the fire they've soaked up all day long. The older brother sat in that heavy, suffocating stillness, his hand resting on his younger sibling's cooling chest. He had done everything he could. He had fanned him with a dusty baseball cap, trickled the last drops of lukewarm water onto his parched lips, and whispered every promise he could think of. But the desert doesn't care about promises. When the boy's breathing finally hitched and stopped, the silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that rings in your ears, making you realize just how small and alone you really are. The 21-year-old didn't leave immediately. He couldn't. He sat there for a long time, the injustice of the situation gnawing at his gut. They were just out for a hike. They were supposed to be back at the lodge by now, complaining about sore feet and ordering a massive dinner. Instead, he was guarding a body in a place where the shadows felt alive. But as the stars began to pierce through the thin mountain air, a cold, hard survival instinct took over. If he stayed there through the night, he wouldn't have the strength to move when the sun came back up to finish the job. He stood up, his joints popping in the silence. He adjusted his pack, took one last, lingering look at the shape of his brother in the dark, and started the long, agonizing climb toward the trailhead. He hiked like a ghost. His mind was a fractured mess of memory and movement. He kept thinking he heard the sound of an engine or the distant shout of his stepfather's voice. Every time he rounded a bend and saw nothing but empty trail, the weight in his chest got heavier. He reached the trailhead just as the first gray light of dawn was beginning to touch the peaks. He didn't find a rescue party. He didn't find his stepfather waiting with a gallon of water and a hug. He found an empty parking lot, save for a few cars belonging to hikers who had probably started their day much more wisely than they had. He managed to flag down a passing vehicle on the main road. The driver took one look at the young man covered in salt, dust, and dried blood, his eyes wide and vacant, and knew this wasn't a standard breakdown. When the Rangers finally arrived, the story began to unravel in the most tragic way possible. They went back for the 14-year-old first, finding him exactly where his brother had left him. But then, the question of the stepfather arose. His car was missing. They began a sweep of the roads, and that's when they found the silver SUV. It was a crumpled wreck at the bottom of the embankment near the Boquillas overlook. The revelation hit like a physical blow. The man hadn't abandoned them. He hadn't gotten lost. He had succeeded in his mission to reach the car, only for the very tool meant to save them to become his coffin. The extreme heat had cooked his brain so thoroughly that he didn't even know he was driving toward his own death. The older brother had to process a double loss in the span of a single sunrise. His brother was gone on the trail, and the man who had died trying to save them was gone in the ravine. It was a total, cascading failure of safety, judgment, and luck. The aftermath of the Big Bend tragedy left a scar on the park that you won't find on any map. A mother back in Florida received the kind of phone call that ends your life as you know it. Her husband and her youngest son gone in a single afternoon. The older son was left with the survivor's debt, a heavy, silent burden of wondering why he was the one who got to walk out of the canyon. The Park Service quietly folded the incident into their annual statistics, another preventable outdoor disaster. They didn't put up a sign. They didn't close the trail. The Marufo Vega remains there, beautiful and indifferent, waiting for the next group of people to believe they're stronger than the sun. The legacy of that day is a warning that echoes through every trailhead in the Southwest. The wilderness is a cruel teacher because it gives the test before the lesson. We like to think that our willpower or our love for our family can shield us from the elements, but nature doesn't negotiate with your heart. It only reacts to your preparation. The story of the family at Big Bend isn't just a story about heat. It's a story about how quickly a moment of confidence can turn into a lifetime of grief. The desert offered no evidence of what it had taken, and as the wind blew the dust over the Marufo Vega, the silence returned, as if nothing had happened at all. The sun still sets over Big Bend, and the hikers still come, but for one family, the landscape will forever be a graveyard. If this story reminded you to respect the power of the natural world, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the incidents that change lives forever. Leave a comment below. Have you ever had a close call in the great outdoors? Stay hydrated, stay prepared, and we'll see you in the next one. One wrong turn changed everything for this family, turning a bonding trip into a national tragedy. To see more deep dives into the thin line between adventure and disaster, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We're uncovering the lessons hidden in the world's most unforgiving places every single week. Disclaimer: this program is produced for entertainment purposes only. While the narrative is based on actual events and official reports from Big Bend National Park, certain dialogue, character perspectives, and atmospheric details have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. This content is not intended as a professional safety guide or a definitive forensic report. Always consult official National Park Service advisories and prioritize expert safety protocols before attempting any high-risk outdoor activity.